Greetings to you, brothers and sisters. In 2014, Eurasia United Methodist Church celebrates its 125th anniversary. In 1889, First United Methodists were gathered here in the city of St. Petersburg. Here we are in the part of city named Vasilievsky Island. It's exactly where the first Methodist mission was started. At the beginning, it was a small group of people, about 7. Gradually, the ministry started growing, and Methodists were growing in number. They had worship services in different languages: Swedish, Finnish, English, Russian. Here, in St. Petersburg, a Methodist deaconess congregation Bethany was founded. A Sister Anna Eklund was the head of it. Due to their ministry, many people were blessed in terms of new clothing, food, and jobs. St. Petersburg is a historical site for all of us, United Methodists in Eurasia. I would like to invite you to a journey piercing time and space when we visit different sites of Eurasia like Far East and West Ukraine, and witness how the Methodists of the end of 19th and beginning 20th century were serving God and their neighbor. I hope that it will encourage us to keep these traditions once settled by them and transform the future we are longing for when making God's will come true. May the Lord bless us.
Пусть Господь нас благословит. Аминь.
My father was born in the settlement of Kamenitsa, which is 12 kilometers away from Uzhgorod, in 1929. In those days, Uzhgorod Methodist Church already existed. It was started like a missionary field of Czechoslovak Methodist Church. In 1923, American missionaries from Nashville, Tennessee Methodist Church bought a building for that church. My grandfather was a Kamenitsa Methodist group leader in 1930s, and later a Methodist church appeared there too. When my father was a school student in Uzhgorod, he had to get from Kamenitsa to Uzhgorod either in a cart or by train, and he often stayed overnight in the church building. One day, Uzhgorod Methodist pastor Gasich Yan told my father, "Study hard, perhaps one day you will become a pastor." My father replied like, "I don't want to. Whether you plan it or not, if it's God's plan and His calling, you will become one." In late 1950s, my father became a group leader in Kamenitsa, right like his father. In those days, Uzhgorod was a part of Czechoslovakia. Then it belonged to Hungary, just before the Second World War. After this, it became Russian. Immediately after, the church building was transferred to the Baptist Church, which actually was a mix of different denominations. Methodist Church became illegal. It was treated like a hostile church, well spread in Europe and the United States. Pastor Jan Gasic was driven out from the church building. The people called Methodists were dissolved. Some of them moved to the Reformed Church, others to the Pentecost Church. Just a small Methodist group remained. The church ministry from now on became illegal. The pastor was on the verge of being imprisoned. He had to find a new job in a furniture factory. Only after the Soviet Union ceased to exist, the church building was given back. Due to archive documents, we provide our ownership rights. But the church have been living and serving throughout this whole period. Estonian church supported our community a lot. It was big and the Soviet power didn't close it. One of my active friends knew several languages and was a very good interpreter. He went on a field trip to Estonia, Tallinn. There he found Methodists. He contacted my father and they started visits and communications. It happened in 1965. They would come to us and we would participate in the conferences in Estonia. And this is my dad in Mukachevo on his urgent trip to get contacts from Estonia UMC. Our church, with the help of Estonia Church, started growing and praying and spreading the gospel. My father was persecuted. The authorities threatened my father, prevented us from doing the worship, blocking the entrance so that churchgoers could not get into the church. Father was a teacher in those days. He lost his job because of faith. Then he had to quit another job, though many colleagues loved him. Then father became a factory worker. He also had to leave this job because of the persecution. The family was on the verge of starving. They were in a constant distress, fearing KGB to come and arrest Dad. It was only 1983 when the church was officially recognized, and even then they were controlled and inspected by the local authorities. No kids ministry, no evangelism, just worship. I remember myself as a child of 7 or 8. At times during worship services, people from outside would stone our windows. One day a young man was preaching and the stone landed just next to him, but he wasn't hurt. So this picture is taken in one of the sisters' private house. It's a 2-room apartment where Methodists were gathered. We are very thankful to our Estonian brothers and sisters who had supported us throughout the years, as well as to our Hungarian partners, and to all the pastors from Hungarian Church who visited us and helped us grow spiritually. My father had a great desire so that young people could study in the seminary. Our Hungarian friends helped us out. They brought teachers of theology and they gave intensive course of studies in this field with the help of the interpreters. We had about 20 students in a 4-year Bible school. They graduated and went to Budapest to get their certificates and diplomas.
I came to the church in 1980s when the congregation was very small. Ivan was a man who passionately loved God. He was so faithful. The church and serving God were everything to him. I remember how Ivan saved money to buy musical instruments for the church, though the wages were extremely small. His heart totally belonged to God. Nothing could frighten him. He followed God all the time. He could meet someone in the street and easily start sharing gospel with him. I also remember the story of one sister and how she became a Christian in the church. She was a stranger waiting for a bus at the bus stop, and Pastor Ivan stopped to give her a lift. He persuasively invited her to the church, though she said that she wasn't dressed for the worship. But still he managed to bring her to the church worship. It was habitual for him to stop and start talking with a person about his or her life and the way of salvation to him or her. He was always thinking of planting new faith communities. Neither bad weather conditions nor his poor health or the threats could prevent him from driving to distant places sharing the good news. He was very passionate about this. Ivan was not a strict person, but if he said you need to do this, everyone obeyed. Young people loved him. We called him Abo, that meant daddy in our local language. And his grandchildren would call him Abo too. Children would say, you have to do this because Abba has said this. And sometimes it was not clear whether they meant their own daddy or Ivan.
1990 году.
It was built in 1990s. We started with the foundation in August. In 1991 we set the building itself, and we could start worship services in 1992. There was almost no money available. I had 2 old cars. I used to buy broken cars, many of them damaged by accidents, repair and sell them. When we got married with Allah, she suggested that we leave country with her parents. I said no, I have a plan to build a church building. Most of the congregation was ready to leave the country for good, but I persuaded them to stay. The congregation helped in constructing. My father-in-law had a cousin in Germany, and we decided to visit him. We exchanged the money to Deutschmarks. We had a plan to buy a car there and sell it in the Ukraine to continue the church constructing. We had little money, not enough for buying a good one, so the only way was to go to the car market, which was a place real Germans would never go. But we talked to cousin Alfred, and he helped us to buy a good Mercedes. Alfred added some money. So we sold the car in the Ukraine. We bought all the construction materials. Germans brought house paints for us, and they also brought food, 80 tons potatoes. We shared this blessing with the neighborhood. May God give you abundant blessings and strengthen you with the Holy Spirit and His power to fill you so that many people may come to your congregations.
This is Turku at Aura River with its harbor and medieval castle further out. And Turku is one of the largest cities in Finland, situated at the southwest corner of the mainland. It once was the capital of the region, but in 1812 the Tsar decided to give the status of capital of the region to the then little village of Helsinki. But the people in Turku has never lost its pride and its awareness that they are carrier of the culture and history. With its archdiocese of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, 2 United Methodist churches that have ministry in 4 different languages. Among one is Russian. As a matter of fact, Eurasian Methodism can trace one of its roots and early heroes back to Turku. Anna Eklund was born here in 1867. She was a young and very creative woman. And in 1880s, she was moved by the Christian awakening in town, and she joined as one of its first members the Methodist Church that decade. Very soon she realized that God is calling her to a special service of love and care for needy people. And the church sent her to Hamburg in Germany for a deaconess training. And after some further education in Sweden, she moved to St. Petersburg, where Bishop William Burt appointed her to the newly opened Methodist Center with its enormous Christian ministry that Sister Anna Eklund built up with the help of 5 enthusiastic young women. And an historian says the assignment suited her well. In addition to an adequate education, she had the power of endurance and a caring faith. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, the ministry reached a new level of challenge, challenges for both Anna Eklund and the others. Dr. Simons and the pastors, most of them were Finnish, have to leave the country, and she stood there alone with the responsibility for everything. For her own ministry, her beloved Sunday school, and the vast ministry among the needy and the poor. And her friends in Finland, they were wondered what will happen. Refugees from all social classes came pouring over the border from Russia along the most peculiar roads. Wouldn't Sister Anna come over the board like the others? People asked themselves. But, says her friend, we knew her. We knew she wouldn't leave her post as long as she was needed and still had a sparkle of life within her and could help others. Only in Christmas Eve in 1924, 4 years later, the family of the friend was around the table on Christmas Eve, and it knocked on the door, and there was Sister Anna. Her face was gray, her hair was gray, and the once round figure was so tiny that the clothes were hanging loose on her. She didn't have time to sit down very much to tell about her sufferings and difficulties, because she had received a sum of money from American Methodists, and she was there in order to buy all the things that she couldn't find in St. Petersburg, but that people needed. That was how she used the days of Christmas, and very soon, all of a sudden, she had it back. She was well respected in the city, and she was able, in spite of the situation, to continue the ministry all the way up to 1930. Then the attitude changed a little, and her health was so difficult. She had anemia, serious one. She had rheumatoid arthritis and a weak heart, and the age, of course, and she returned to Finland. She lived in Helsinki until her death in 1949 and was buried here in Turku. The whole life of Anna Eklund is a monument of faith and faithfulness, and we will never forget her. We keep the memory of the past and build the future.
Here we are in the 10th Line Street, block 37. On this spot, the First Methodist congregation started its ministry in 1909. For several years in a row, they had worship services in this building, as well as Sunday school and Bible classes right until 1914, when they bought a building at the Bolshoi Prospect Street 58. The Bolshoi Prospect is just in front of us, and behind me there is a block number 58. 100 years ago, in 1914, a Methodist congregation, due to the generous offering of our sister from United States, Fanny Gamble, the Methodists managed to buy a building here. They were gathered each Sunday and during the week to have worship services in different languages: Russian, Swedish, Finnish, English. Local Methodists could read the magazine Christian Advocate, which was published monthly due to our congregation's hard work. They had Bible classes, Sunday school, class meetings. But today there is nothing left from the previous building. This building is a block of flats. but the history of this site is still precious to us. Sister Anna Eklund served many people here, especially the needy and the poor, kids and old people. In early 20s of the 20th century, many people died because of cholera, the lack of food, clothing and shoes. Anna Eklund, together with other ministers from Bethany congregation, searched for opportunities to summon the donation from our brothers and sisters from all over the world. They sent clothing, shoes, food. Anna would harness a horse and load the wagon to circle around the city and bless people with this donation. She buried several persons with her own hands. They got frozen dead during the cold winters of the 20s. Today we are thankful to our first Methodists who served selflessly and wholeheartedly, being faithful, sacrificial and generous. I'd like us to go on with these traditions, preserving them and transforming the future for us today in 2014. In the future God grants us with for His sake. When being in Seoul, I met Pastor Yong-sung Choi, who wrote a book about Pastor Yonghuk Kim and gave me several photos. On one of the pictures, 5 ministers together with Bishop Hyam Boaz. He is the Bishop of South Methodist Episcopal Church in the United States. He was appointed in the 20s of the last century. His mission was to take the responsibility of the church work in Siberia and the Far East. On the picture you can also see District Superintendent Ryan. He is in front. And on the left, the second row, we can see Pastor Yonghuk. In other pictures, we can see ministers meeting and the Korean congregation with Pastor Yonghuk Kim in the center. We also have the photo of his family, where he, his spouse, his kids and mom are depicted. We know this for sure now, that his spouse with the kids has returned to Korea back in the 20s and lived there until recently. His kids are still in Korea. On one of the pictures we see Pastor Yonghuk. In the right upper corner of his passport photo there is a seal. You can see it's a Japanese seal. That reminds us of the fact that back in the 20s Korea was occupied by Japan and Pastor Yonghuk Kim became a Japanese citizen. In fact, when one looks at the pictures of the previous century, keeping in mind the hardships the people struggled with, it's really amazing how faithful to Jesus Christ the people were, serving and doing their ministry, their race despite all the difficulties they faced. So they endured hunger, wars, occupation, immigration. We can hardly imagine this today. In spite all of this, they continued being in mission and kept on thinking how to best they could help the needy and develop our churches.